The rain fell in a steady, mournful drizzle as the faded Blacktown car pulled up to Rosewood Pines Care Facility, a place where time seemed to sag at the corners, just like its peeling beige walls and rust-stained window panes. Eleanor Brooks sat silently in the back seat, her once regal posture now diminished by exhaustion, betrayal, and the ache of 74 long years spent earning a family's love that now felt counterfeit. She hadn't been told they were going there. Her son, Malcolm, had said they were going for a routine checkup. Her daughter-in-law, Vanessa, had barely looked at her during the ride. When the car stopped and the driver opened the door, Eleanor's first thought was, "This isn't a hospital." Her second was far darker. "They're leaving me here." Inside, the facility smelled of antiseptic, stale biscuits, and something Eleanor refused to name. A receptionist with a tight bun and tighter smile offered a clipboard to Malcolm. Eleanor noticed how quickly he signed, not even pretending to hesitate. Vanessa offered a too cheery goodbye, a kiss on the cheek that felt more like a slap, before rushing out the door as if afraid Eleanor might follow. The head nurse, a woman named Gloria with the warmth of a prison warden, wheeled Eleanor down a long corridor that echoed with coughs and whispers. "You'll be in room 208, Gloria said, not bothering to look her in the eye. "Don't wander. It upsets the others." Room 208 had cracked linoleum floors and a window that faced a brick wall. No flowers, no photos, just a bed, a threadbare blanket, and silence that pressed against Eleanor like a physical weight. But it wasn't the room that broke her. It was the absence. No explanation from her children. No hug goodbye. Just erasure. The whispers had started weeks earlier. Misfiled bills, missed medications, moments of confusion that Eleanor swore were lies. The final blow came when Malcolm accused her of nearly burning down the kitchen, an incident Eleanor was certain never happened. Then, just like that, her access to her accounts was frozen, her calendar vanished, her house was sold, and here she was, alone, discarded, forgotten, except Eleanor Brooks was not a woman easily erased. Beneath the brittle exterior and the stiff joints was a mind sharper than any scalpel, and a heart that, though bruised, still beat with defiance. As she sat on the bed, staring at the locked drawer of the nightstand, she whispered to herself, "Let them think I'm broken. Let them think I'm done." Then, very quietly, she added, "They'll regret it." Eleanor had never been one to sit idle. As the early days in room 208 dragged on, she watched and listened, quietly, invisibly. The staff talked around her, assuming she was too far gone to understand. Other residents, some silent, some screaming into the void of neglect, became her background choir of sorrow, but Eleanor was not one of them. She observed patterns, took mental notes, waited. Her opportunity came on a rainy Thursday, when a janitor left the supply closet door cracked open during a power flicker. The moment he turned his back, Eleanor slipped inside, moving more quickly than anyone would have guessed she could. Her eyes scanned the shelves of forgotten electronics, expired batteries, and unused medical gear until she spotted it. An old Dell laptop, half covered in dust and post-it notes, the kind of relic no one would ever think to inventory. Back in her room, she hid the device beneath her mattress. That night, as the facility sank into its usual eerie stillness, she booted it up. It was slow, clunky, but alive. She bypassed the login easily. Password protection had never been a strength of lazy orderlies. What she found inside stopped her cold. Files, dozens of them, medical logs, patient reports, and, most disturbingly, a hidden folder labeled LM. She clicked. Inside were videos recorded over the last 2 years by a former resident named Lorraine Madsen. Eleanor remembered Lorraine. Kind eyes, always humming some old Billie Holiday tune. One day she simply vanished. Moved to a better facility, they'd said, but the tone the nurses used? Eleanor had never believed it. The videos told the real story. Neglect, verbal abuse, drug mix-ups. One video showed Lorraine begging for help after a fall. The timestamp revealed she was left on the floor for 6 hours. Another showed Gloria, the same nurse who had wheeled Eleanor in, switching medication labels on a confused man named Raymond. Eleanor's hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. She copied everything onto a USB drive she found in the laptop case. And then, she began recording her own videos diary style. Her first entry was raw, honest. She spoke of her betrayal, of the lies her children told, of the pain of being erased by the very people she gave everything to. Then she turned the camera toward the hallway and whispered, "This place hides ghosts in plain sight." Each day, she tucked the camera into new corners. The medication room, the staff lounge, the back exit, where orderlies smoked and joked about residents as if they were children. She captured them all. Not just mistreatment, but the casual cruelty that made this place not just broken, but dangerous. As Eleanor clicked save on her 5th entry, she glanced at the mirror across from her bed. For the first time since arriving, she saw a flicker of her old self staring back. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was war. The shift changes at Rosewood Pines were like clockwork, and Eleanor had memorized them within the first week. But one Thursday morning, a new face appeared during the early rounds. She wore her scrubs differently than the others, more practical than polished, and her eyes, they weren't dulled by routine, they were watchful. Her name tag read Janice. Mid-40s. Warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She moved carefully, as though carrying invisible burdens. When she introduced herself to Eleanor, her voice was calm, measured. "I'll be covering your wing for a few weeks while Nurse Gloria is on leave," Janice said, checking Eleanor's blood pressure. "Let me know if you need anything." That was the beginning. Eleanor watched her. Janice wasn't like the others. She didn't bark orders or speak to residents like toddlers. She listened. She sat. Sometimes she'd hum under her breath while changing sheets, a low, bluesy tune that tickled the edge of Eleanor's memory. Then, one morning, as Janice was refilling Eleanor's water pitcher, she paused mid-step. Her gaze had fallen on the photo tucked discreetly under Eleanor's pillow, the only possession she was allowed to keep. It was a decades-old picture of Eleanor and her late husband, Charles Brooks, taken at a garden party back when life was gilded and full of promises. Janice went very still. "You knew Charles Brooks?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "I was Mrs. Charles Brooks." Janice blinked once. Then again. "Of course," she said quickly, but her composure had cracked. Her hands shook as she placed the pitcher down. That afternoon, she returned under the pretense of checking Eleanor's vitals again. But when the door shut, her tone changed. "I know this will sound strange," Janice said, glancing toward the hallway to ensure privacy, "but I remember you. From years ago. You and your husband. I saw you at a fundraiser. You probably wouldn't remember me. I was a teenager, there with my aunt, who worked your events." Eleanor studied her. There was something urgent behind the woman's eyes. A memory, maybe, that hadn't healed right. "You weren't just at a fundraiser, were you?" Janice hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she sat beside the bed. "My aunt, Marilyn, used to clean for you back in the 80s. One night she came home crying. Said she overheard something she wasn't supposed to. A fight between your husband and another man. She said it was about a woman and a child." Eleanor's stomach tightened, but her face remained still. "She never told me the names," Janice added. "Just that there was a lot of money involved and that someone wanted the child gone. Covered up. Forgotten." A cold silence settled between them. Eleanor turned to look out the window, her mind scraping against memories long buried. Whispers, accusations, and her husband's late-night phone calls she was never allowed to question. "And you think that has something to do with why you're here?" Eleanor finally asked. "I think," Janice said slowly, "your family has more secrets than you realize, and someone didn't want you to find them." For the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. It was no longer just a personal betrayal she was unraveling. It was a conspiracy. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Eleanor's voice left the walls of Rosewood Pines and reached the world. The nursing home was in its usual state of drudgery. Nurses shouting down the hall, TVs blaring at full volume, residents left parked in wheelchairs like forgotten luggage. Eleanor sat by the window, the dusty old laptop perched precariously on a stack of books she'd snuck from the recreation room. She stared into the webcam and spoke softly, not to anyone in particular, but as if to the memory of her former self. "This is what abandonment looks like," she began, her voice steady but tinged with ache. "Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes in the form of signatures on papers, frozen accounts, and fake smiles at Sunday brunch." She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply told the truth. How her children, Malcolm and Vanessa, manipulated her finances after her husband's death. How they whispered to doctors that she was forgetting things, coached her caregivers to report confusion, slowly constructing a legal case that painted her as unfit. The lies were subtle, strategic, and effective. She clicked save and filed it away, as she had with her other recordings. But that day, something shifted. That afternoon, during a visit from the local high school's Community Kindness Club, a painfully cheerful volunteer program, a teenage girl named Lexi Morales was assigned to Eleanor's room. Lexi was sharp, bored, and, unlike her classmates, drawn to Eleanor's sharp tongue and unfazed glare. "You're not like the others," she said after Eleanor dryly critiqued the sugary apple juice. "Neither are you," Eleanor replied, eyeing her piercings and combat boots. When Lexi spotted the old laptop, she laughed. "That thing still boots up?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "It does more than that." She hesitated, then showed Lexi one of her videos. Not the ones with staff abuse, but the one where she spoke directly to the camera about being discarded by the people she loved. About aging. About feeling invisible. Lexi didn't laugh. She asked, "Can I show this to someone?" Eleanor shrugged. "What's the worst they can do? Abandon me twice." Lexi uploaded the video that night to a private TikTok account. No filters, no edits. Just a raw caption. "This woman was abandoned by her kids. Listen to what she has to say." By morning, it had 1.4 million views. By noon, Eleanor Brooks was trending. Hashtag #ForgottenAmore, hashtag LeanorSpeaks, hashtag #JusticeForLeanor Cable News picked it up within 48 hours. Celebrities retweeted her video with messages like, "This woman is a queen," and "How did we let this happen?" Influencers filmed tearful reactions. Advocacy groups for elder rights came calling. Rosewood Pines issued a statement of concern, but behind the scenes, panic brewed. When Gloria returned from leave, she nearly dropped her clipboard. "Congratulations," Eleanor said with a faint smirk. "I seem to have gone viral." But what none of them realized, not Gloria, not Malcolm, not Vanessa, was that Eleanor's sudden fame wasn't just an accident. It was the beginning of exposure. Because behind that first video were hours of footage, proof, names, timelines. And Eleanor was no longer just a forgotten woman in room 208. She was a reckoning in progress. Eleanor Brooks had always believed in order. She'd color-coded her pantry, alphabetized her books, and kept 3 backup copies of every legal document. Her late husband Charles had called it charming. Her children called it obsessive. But now that very habit, the need for structure, for clarity, might be the only thing that could save her legacy. The world outside was still buzzing. Her video had racked up millions of views, interviews were being requested, and Rosewood Pines had gone from neglectful to suspiciously attentive. But Eleanor wasn't fooled. The administrators weren't trying to protect her. They were protecting themselves. So she turned her attention inward, back to the real battle. Late one night, after pretending to fall asleep during medication rounds, she reached beneath her mattress and retrieved the USB drive she'd hidden inside an old vitamin bottle. It contained the digitized copy of her original will and a growing file of encrypted notes she'd kept since the day her children had tricked her into signing over power of attorney. Something didn't add up. The will she remembered drafting with her late husband was clear. If anything happened to her, the estate was to be divided between specific parties, including a charity Charles had founded and a trust fund for a mysterious beneficiary she'd never publicly acknowledged. But the version her children claimed to have, it was entirely different. It gave everything, to Malcolm and Vanessa. There had to be a second will, and Eleanor was certain it had disappeared the day she was institutionalized. She brought her suspicions to Janice. They met in secret during shift changes, speaking in code, whispering in utility closets and over-hushed lunch trays. Janice took the lead on digging through old contacts, former attorneys, estate planners, anyone with a memory long enough to recall Eleanor's real intentions. One name surfaced: Raymond Cordell, a retired legal assistant who had once worked with Charles Brooks and had quietly disappeared from the public eye after Charles's death. According to Janice's contact, Cordell had left the firm under strange circumstances. Something about a sealed document, a falling out, and a warning that someone upstairs was tampering with legacy files. Through Lexi, who was now fully embedded in Eleanor's corner and using her social media following like a digital army, they put out feelers, not about Cordell, but about missing wills, elder legal manipulation, and unexplained estate changes. Within days, messages poured in. Most were heartbreaking, some were shocking, but one, from an anonymous account with the initials RC, simply read, "I never destroyed it. I hid it in plain sight. Follow the paper trail. Start with the trust." Eleanor sat back, heart pounding. She remembered now. The Brooks family trust had been updated shortly before Charles's death. He'd insisted on handling it personally, bypassing the family lawyer and delivering the new documents himself. The update wasn't about money, though. It was about a name Eleanor had never seen before. Lila, listed as a conditional heir. Eleanor had chalked it up to one of Charles's old business debts, but now, that name was the thread, and if she pulled it, everything her children had stolen, everything they had built their lives on, might unravel. She looked at Janice, who had grown pale. "You recognize the name?" Eleanor said. Janice nodded slowly. "Yes. And if it's who I think it is, this is bigger than just a missing will." Eleanor's voice, when she spoke, was like steel sharpened on silence. "Then it's time to find her." The day Eleanor learned the truth was the day everything she had ever known about her family, about her children, shattered. It came in the form of a confession. Janice had made contact with Samuel Hunter, an old family friend who had become a lawyer after working as a business consultant for the Brooks family. Samuel had always been a fixture at the grand family dinners, a constant presence at their soirees. He had a reputation for being unflappable, always composed, always in control. But that was before he'd seen the faces of the people who had once been his friends, Eleanor's children, contorting into something unrecognizable, ruthless. Greed had turned them into strangers. Samuel met Eleanor under the guise of delivering legal documents, but when they were alone and the door was firmly shut, his voice was trembling, his hands shaking. "I have to tell you something," he said quietly, as though every word was an unbearable weight. "I couldn't be part of this anymore. What your children did, what they're still doing." Eleanor felt a chill run through her. She had known her children were capable of dishonesty, of manipulation, but she had never imagined the lengths they would go to. Samuel paused, wiped his brow, and continued. "They staged it all, your breakdown, the diagnosis, the power of attorney. It wasn't you who signed those papers, Eleanor. It was forged. The lawyer they used was one of their old college friends. They bribed him. Your estate, your wealth, it was never meant to go to them. It was meant to go to the charity, the trust." Eleanor's chest tightened as the puzzle pieces fell into place. But there was more. So much more. "There's one more thing," Samuel said. "One of your children isn't even yours." Eleanor's mind froze. "What do you mean?" Samuel hesitated, then swallowed hard. "Vanessa. She's not your biological daughter. She's the result of an affair Charles had with your best friend, Marilyn. I found out when I went through the old documents. There was a paternity test. It was kept hidden, sealed. Marilyn told Charles that it was just an affair, that it would never affect the family. But I don't think she ever intended to tell you." The air seemed to thicken as the truth twisted into something Eleanor could barely comprehend. Vanessa, her own daughter, was not hers. A lie. A betrayal wrapped in the soft, warm illusion of family. Eleanor had always suspected there was something about Vanessa. Her coldness, her sharpness, the way she had never seemed to care much about her or Charles. But to learn this? It sent a cold, sharp wedge deep into Eleanor's heart. "What did they do with the money?" Eleanor whispered, barely able to speak. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the idea of a daughter who wasn't hers, and a son who had grown into a man she no longer recognized. "They funneled it. They've been hiding it in offshore accounts. It's all been disguised as business expenses, investments, emergency funds. It's a network, a maze. I have access to some of it, but not all." Eleanor sat back, her mind working furiously. This wasn't just a betrayal of her trust. This was the betrayal of everything she had built with Charles, everything she had sacrificed for her family. She had given them everything, and in return, they had taken everything she had, piece by piece. But Eleanor was no stranger to loss. She knew what it felt like to be robbed of something, to be erased, and that knowledge sparked something in her. Her family had stolen her life, her wealth, her legacy. It was time to take it all back. With Janice's help, Eleanor began assembling the evidence. Samuel had offered to help track down the hidden accounts, but Eleanor was too wary. She'd been betrayed too many times to trust anyone fully. Instead, she sent Janice on a covert mission, using her medical connections to dig through old documents, patient reports, and secret emails. They needed something concrete, something that would expose Vanessa's secret once and for all. As the pieces began to fit together, Eleanor's resolve hardened. The truth was out there, and now she had everything she needed to bring it all crashing down. Eleanor's hands trembled as she ran the search results across the laptop screen. The name Lila had appeared again and again, like a whisper on the edge of memory. And each time she encountered it, it seemed to elude her grasp, slipping further into the shadows of her past. Janice had been her ally in this, quietly working behind the scenes with the kind of persistence Eleanor admired. She'd traced the name Lila back to an old address book of Charles's, one that Eleanor hadn't touched in years. The pages were yellowed, the ink faint, but the name was clear. Lila Forsythe, marked in a peculiar, almost cryptic way. Special, but complicated. The confusion in Eleanor's chest grew as the pieces started to fall into place. Lila. A name she didn't recognize. Yet something about it sparked an old ache in her heart. Why had Charles hidden her from the world? Why hadn't she known about this woman? There were no answers in the notes, only vague references to a complicated situation. But it was the name itself that seemed to haunt her. Eleanor's late husband, Charles, had been a man of many secrets, business dealings, infidelities, and countless lies. But Lila wasn't just a casual affair, was she? Eleanor's thoughts were interrupted by a quiet knock at the door. "Come in," she said, her voice unexpectedly sharp. Janice stepped into the room, holding a folder thick with documents. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with urgency. She set the folder down and sat across from Eleanor, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "I found something," she said quietly. Eleanor leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" Janice opened the folder, revealing a series of photographs. At first glance, they looked like ordinary family photos, snapshots of picnics, family gatherings, and milestones. But there, in the background of one photo, was a familiar face. Eleanor's chest tightened. It was a woman in her mid-30s, standing behind Charles and Eleanor at a family reunion, a slight smile on her lips. But it wasn't just any woman. It was Lila Forsythe. Eleanor stared at the photo, feeling a strange tightening in her chest. She didn't recognize her at all, but the resemblance between Lila and her daughter Vanessa was undeniable. The same sharp features, the same green eyes. It was as if she were looking at a ghost, a shadow of what could have been. Janice spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lila was Charles's daughter. She was Marilyn's child, your best friend. Charles and Marilyn had an affair years ago. I found an old letter from Marilyn, admitting it. It's all here, in the file." Eleanor's mind reeled. The woman who had been her closest confidant, the woman who had once been her best friend, She had betrayed her in the most intimate way possible. Marilyn had carried on a secret affair with Charles, and Lila was the result of that affair. And now, the child of that betrayal, Lila Forsythe, was part of the story that had been kept hidden for so long. The realization hit Eleanor like a tidal wave. Not only had her own children betrayed her, but so had the woman she had trusted with her life. Marilyn's betrayal wasn't just about an affair. It was about taking something far more precious, her family's legacy, her wealth, and her own future. But Lila had been left out of the equation, just like Eleanor had been pushed aside. She had been the forgotten heir. Janice's voice broke through Eleanor's thoughts. "There's more," she said softly. "Lila's been looking for you. She knows something is wrong, and she's been trying to piece it all together too." Eleanor's heart pounded. Could it be true? Could Lila, the daughter of the woman who had betrayed her, be the key to unlocking the truth about everything? "Where is she?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady, despite the storm brewing in her chest. Janice hesitated, then nodded toward the folder. "I've tracked her down. She's in New York now, working at a small cafe. I spoke to her briefly. She doesn't know the whole story, but she knows something's not right. She's the key to everything, Eleanor. You need to find her." Eleanor's mind was already racing. The plans were falling into place, one by one. She needed to find Lila. She needed to speak to her, to hear her side of the story, to find out if the missing will existed, if she was truly the rightful heir to the Brooks fortune. But more than that, Eleanor needed to know one thing. Could Lila help her reclaim what was rightfully hers? Or would this new connection only complicate things further? Her heart heavy with the weight of betrayal and hope, Eleanor closed the folder and locked eyes with Janice. "We leave tomorrow," she said quietly. "Find me a way to meet her. It's time to face the past." The courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the back walls, and the press had swarmed in from every corner of the city, drawn by the promise of scandal and betrayal. The once polished, prestigious Brooks name was now synonymous with corruption, greed, and deceit. And Eleanor, the woman they had tried to silence, stood in the middle of it all, unshaken, unbroken, and ready to reclaim her life. Eleanor's children had arrived first. Malcolm, the eldest, sat with an air of arrogance, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his cold eyes scanning the room. Vanessa, the daughter who was not truly hers, had arrived shortly thereafter, her face a mask of indifference though her fingers betrayed her. They trembled ever so slightly as she clutched her attorney's arm. They thought they could win, they thought they could control the narrative. But Eleanor wasn't about to let that happen. As the trial began, Eleanor's heart beat steadily. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, each piece of the puzzle clicking into place as her lawyers laid out the case. The forged documents, the stolen wealth, the manipulation of her family. The world was watching, and she was ready to expose every lie they'd ever told. Her attorney, a sharp, seasoned woman named Catherine Hayes, stood up first. With poise and determination, she addressed the court. "Your Honor, we are here today because Eleanor Brooks, a woman who has spent her life dedicated to her family, has been wrongfully deprived of her assets, her reputation, and most tragically, her dignity. We will prove that her children, the defendants, orchestrated a fraudulent power of attorney, fabricated a breakdown diagnosis, and conspired to strip her of everything she worked for." The courtroom was silent, the tension thick in the air. Eleanor's eyes flicked to Malcolm, whose jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this. And Vanessa, she refused to meet Eleanor's gaze, her eyes focused on the table in front of her. Catherine continued, her voice cutting through the silence. "We will present evidence that Eleanor Brooks's children not only forged documents, but also kept hidden from her a second will, one that she drafted before they had her institutionalized. The second will, we believe, will reveal the true intent of Eleanor's wishes." Malcolm's lawyer stood up, attempting to interrupt, but the judge, a seasoned man with a reputation for impartiality, raised a hand. "Please, let's proceed without interruption. We are here to hear the facts." And so they began. Eleanor's side laid out the forged signatures, the financial records of the offshore accounts where her children had hidden her money, the mysterious phone call from Samuel Hunter, the family friend who had uncovered the truth about the forged documents. Then came the bombshell. Catherine turned toward the judge and presented the letter. "This letter," she began, "was found among the late Charles Brooks's personal papers. It was sent to a family friend, Raymond Cordell, a legal assistant who worked with the Brooks estate. In it, Charles Brooks confesses to the existence of a second will, one that names another heir, a woman who was kept hidden from the public. Her name is Lila Forsythe, and she is the product of a long-buried affair between Charles Brooks and Eleanor's best friend, Marilyn Forsythe." The room went still. The impact of the words landed like a heavy blow, and Eleanor could feel the world shifting around her. Her children, once so sure of their victory, now looked rattled. Vanessa's face drained of color, and even Malcolm appeared shaken for the first time. The secret that had been buried for so long was now laid bare. Eleanor's voice was calm when it finally broke through the silence. "Lila Forsythe," she said, her eyes trained on her children, "is my daughter, your sister. And she deserves to know the truth about who she is, and about the legacy you have stolen." Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. "No, that's not possible," she whispered, shaking her head. But her words were weak. Eleanor could see the cracks in her carefully constructed persona. The guilt was written all over her face. Then came the final blow. Eleanor's attorney called to the stand a key witness, Janice. Eleanor had never expected Janice to testify, but the nurse had proven herself to be a loyal and steadfast ally, and her testimony was undeniable. She had seen the manipulation firsthand. She had witnessed the forging of Eleanor's signature, the alteration of the family trust documents, and the coordinated effort to have Eleanor declared mentally unfit. Janice spoke clearly, her voice steady as she recalled the days leading up to Eleanor's institutionalization. "I saw it with my own eyes. They were plotting. It was always about the money, about the estate. I don't believe for a second that Eleanor was mentally unfit. She's sharp, she's clear-headed, and she knows exactly what her children did." The courtroom erupted. The defense attorney scrambled, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no denying it. The once perfect facade of the Brooks family had crumbled. Eleanor sat back, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. She was going to win. She was going to take back her life. But as the judge called for a recess, Eleanor's mind drifted for a moment. She thought of Lila, the child of betrayal, the forgotten heir. She wondered if Lila was watching this unfold. She hoped that, someday, Lila would understand why this was necessary. The fight was far from over. But Eleanor was no longer the woman who had been abandoned and silenced. She was taking her legacy back, one piece at a time. The court ruling had come down like a thunderclap. Eleanor Brooks was restored as the rightful controller of her estate. The fraudulent will was voided, and her children's names removed from any inheritance claims. The media dubbed it the trial that shook the wealthy elite. But for Eleanor, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her final, breathtaking move. The world expected retribution. After all, her children had institutionalized her, stolen her money, slandered her name, and left her in a decaying nursing home to wither and die. If anyone had earned the right to exact revenge, it was Eleanor. But the real shock wasn't what she did next. It was how she did it. 3 weeks after the court victory, Eleanor summoned her lawyers, the press, and a select group of trusted individuals to a live-streamed press conference. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the podium, dressed in a tailored black suit with a strand of her late mother's pearls and her head held high. Her voice was clear, poised, devastating. "I've spent a lifetime building a legacy I thought would protect and empower my family," she began. "But when tested, that same family reduced me to a line on a balance sheet. They saw my love as weakness. They mistook silence for senility. And so today, I speak with clarity for every elder who's ever been forgotten, and for every truth buried by wealth and pride." She turned to the camera directly. "Effective immediately, I am relinquishing control of the Brooks estate, not to my children, but to someone more deserving." The room stirred. "I have established a new trust, the Forsythe Brooks Foundation, dedicated to funding safe housing and legal aid for abandoned elders, caregivers, and whistleblowers inside long-term care facilities. Its initial funding will exceed $80 million, and the person appointed to oversee this foundation," she paused, "is Lila Forsythe." The crowd gasped. Eleanor continued, unfazed, her voice unwavering. "My late husband's daughter. The child they all tried to erase. The woman none of them had the decency to acknowledge, let alone welcome. She may not carry my blood, but she carries the legacy I choose to honor." Reporters began shouting questions, but Eleanor raised a hand, silencing them. "Lila is smart, independent, fierce. She's worked every day of her life without privilege. She doesn't want my money. She wants justice. That's why she's the one I trust to build something better than I ever could." Behind her, Lila stepped into view, elegant in a simple blue dress, her face composed but emotional. The cameras turned to her, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence beside Eleanor said everything. Eleanor wasn't finished. "And to my children," she added, her voice cooling, "I leave this. Nothing but the truth. It will haunt you longer than any fortune could have sustained you. May you learn that legacies are not built on lies, and may you someday understand that what you tried to take was never yours." The livestream ended with Eleanor and Lila standing side by side. No further comment, no dramatics. But the fallout was seismic. Vanessa was spotted sobbing outside the courthouse days later, her career in real estate in ruins. Malcolm attempted to sue for defamation, only to have his case dismissed before it even reached a judge. Their polished facades shattered in public view, their reputations scorched by the very fire they'd kindled against Eleanor. Behind the scenes, Eleanor quietly reconciled with Janice. The two women had shared so much pain, and now a revelation. In a letter left by Eleanor's estranged sister, it was revealed that Janice was her niece, the child of a sibling Eleanor believed had died young. A twist of fate had brought them back together, strangers no more. Janice wept when Eleanor showed her the letter. "Your family," Eleanor told her, placing a gentle hand over Janice's. "Not by convenience, by truth." And just like that, Eleanor's circle, once poisoned by betrayal, began to heal. Not through vengeance, through intentional legacy. Weeks passed since the press conference that stunned the nation. The media couldn't get enough of Eleanor Brooks, now dubbed the matriarch who defied everything. Her speeches were clipped into viral inspiration videos. Her foundation, overseen by Lila Forsythe, was already opening its first care center. The world watched with admiration, but Eleanor had vanished. No public appearances, no interviews, no new videos. Just silence. Rumors exploded online. Some claimed Eleanor had passed away quietly. Others swore they spotted her in Florence, Italy. A few even suggested she was working under a new name, mentoring young activists from behind the scenes. But no one had proof. Until one day, a final video appeared. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come from a network or influencer. It was posted by an anonymous account, just a still image of Eleanor standing outside the nursing home where it had all begun. She looked the same, yet changed. Her once white curls were tied back neatly. Her cane was gone. She stood tall, a soft smile playing on her lips. And then the video began. No music, just Eleanor's voice. "They tried to bury me," she said, her gaze piercing the lens. "They didn't know I was a seed." The screen faded to black. The world held its breath. That video, only 14 seconds long, would rack up over 100 million views in its first week. Not for what it showed, but for what it meant. Eleanor Brooks wasn't just a woman who fought back. She had become a symbol of resilience, of truth, of what it meant to grow even in the darkest soil. Lila continued the work. Under her guidance, the Forsythe Brooks Foundation expanded into 5 countries, exposing abuse in care systems and advocating for elder rights. Janice stayed at the heart of it all, managing care centers that honored dignity above profit. As for Eleanor, her last public trace was a letter left at the dedication of the Foundation's flagship facility. It read, "To those who feel forgotten, you are not invisible, you are not weak. You are not done. They may try to erase your story, but only you decide how it ends. With love and defiance, Eleanor." Some believe she lives quietly now, writing her memoir in a cottage by the sea. Others think she's still moving from place to place, leaving behind sparks of rebellion and justice wherever she goes. But wherever she is, one thing is certain: Eleanor Brooks lives on, not just in memory, but in every voice that refuses to be silenced.